Hello and welcome back to Authentically Shauna. I'm your host, Dr. Shauna Burke. Today I am joined by Angie Noack, who is the Senior Vice President for Brain Code Centers. I am so excited to have Angie on because Brain Code Centers is one of the groups of clinicians that I personally work with. And so it's generally one of my goals to talk with people who are on my team. And so Angie and I truthfully have never met. This is our first time meeting. I work with other people on her team. And so she graciously came on the podcast with me. And I'm so excited to talk about all things neurofeedback with Angie. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So tell me just a basic definition of what is neurofeedback and how did you come to be involved with neurofeedback?
My gosh, absolutely. So first off, I feel like sometimes the brain, it feels very distant, very obtruse, very, complicated. And neurofeedback boils down to operant conditioning of the brain, right? It is reward-based training. We're teaching the brain to create new neural pathways to serve people better. So with brain code centers, the way in which we start is with a baseline qEEG brain map. It's a quantitative electroencephalogram. And it essentially gives us all the information that we need, right? It shows itself to us within patterns in the brain map. Anxiety, depression, ADD, trauma, PTSD, brain injury, sleep issues. All of those things manifest themselves within patterns. And that's really what we're looking to see. And that's why we start there, as something like anxiety alone can come from 50 different patterns in the brain. So we really need to know exactly where it's coming from in that person's brain. So we start there with that scan. We go over it with the patient, as I am very big on education. I want people to have a strong understanding of kind of why their brain is doing what it's doing, right? It's like a visual form of grace just to understand what's going on. And then the actual neurofeedback treatment is that operant conditioning. It's reward training. We're literally teaching the brain to create new neural pathways, and we do that with reward. So you think puppy with treat, right? Tell a puppy to sit, give it a treat, it repeats the behavior because it wants the reward. Eventually, we can take away the treat and it still knows how to sit, as now that's a new neurological high in its brain, right? And we do that through visual and auditory stimulus. So, Sean, I believe that you were saying you do remote neurofeedback with us. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
So you have a headset at home. It has a lot of electrodes embedded into it. Obviously, you know this, listeners might not. There is no electrical stimulus going into your brain, right? We're not shocking the brain in any way. Nothing's going in. The electrodes are picking up information, kind of monitoring and reading what the brain is doing. And then the feedback loop of neurofeedback is the electrodes pick up the electricity, it goes into the amplifier, into software, and then gets fed back to you through visual and auditory reward. Think about video games, right? That, how are we receiving reward through video games? We don't get a cookie or cash when we win. It's only novelty stimulus. So essentially, we're giving your brain little hits of dopamine and reward when it's producing neurological wave activity that's favorable to you, therefore changing patterns, therefore changing symptomology.
Which I think is hard for us as humans to understand because we can't see that happening in real time. Like I'm just thinking if I train my biceps, for example, I can see over time that my muscle definition changes. And so I think the interesting part about the brain is sometimes it's hard to understand and quantify how your brain is changing. And I think that's where the brain map is really helpful because you can do a comparative. And this is what I've noticed in my own experience of working with you all is, okay, what does my brain look like when I start with? I do this thing that doesn't really feel like anything, if I'm being honest. I'm getting a reward. So how it works for me in this remote version is I get to watch little YouTube videos. There's YouTube shorts or videos, and I pick a YouTube video and I go into my protocol. And for me, I'm just watching a video. I'm actively not trying to do anything. I'm letting my brain process what's going on. And you think, okay, I'm watching this YouTube video. I know something is happening, but until you start to feel a difference, you go, I don't even feel like I had to do anything to help my brain make neural pathways. That's, I think, the really interesting part for me is as a feedback is I don't have to quote unquote do anything. My brain is training itself and I just get to be a passenger.
That is exactly right. And I hear that from people all the time, right? That like, how do I know if it's working? What's going on? And I love that you used a workout analogy because I seem to only know how to use workout analogies. You're right, though, that we take before and after pictures of our body because we live in our body, right? And so sometimes it's like, we've been working out and pumping weight and we're like, I haven't lost any weight, nothing has changed. And then we look back at a picture and we're like, like, wait a second, girl, you're looking shredded. So we can very much see that, kind of quantitative change in our bodies. Neurofeedback is also highly quantitative, right? That we are able to watch what your brain is producing via microvoltage every single session. First session, your brain produces 45 hertz of high beta stress wave activity in the prefrontal cortex. 10 sessions later, it's producing 37. 10 sessions after that, it's producing 25. Yes, you should feel less anxiety. You should feel less stress. You should be sleeping better. And also, we're able to share the numbers with you and go, hey, your brain is killing it, and here's how.
Which I think is such an interesting dynamic, again, because it's sort of like looking at blood work. I think that's another great example, right? It's not like you get your blood drawn and then you do like a supplement protocol, you do something. It's not like you actively generally feel like your blood is changing. You don't go, huh, my blood feels different today. But you,
Blood feels so good
yeah,
today.
but you over time start to feel a difference. And then you do your blood work again. You go, this is what shifted. So I think those two are really comparative of blood work and a qEEG because it allows you to see this thing inside of you that has a hard time being seen or monitored otherwise.
You're
Tell us,
exactly right.
how did you get to neurofeedback?
Yes. So first off, I feel like neurofeedback finds you, you don't find it. I don't know how.
Yes.
What I like I when things are a calling, right? When things are meant for you and you are meant for it, it's going to find you either way. So, honestly, it was kind of a full life circle situation that at 19 suffered a skull fracture, traumatic brain injury that left me in a walker and with a lot of cognitive and physical issues, right? So, at a very young age, I had to become very aware of not only the brain but of my brain, right? And how my brain was quite literally my best asset ever, and my best asset was very deeply damaged. Also, fortunately, I had Carolyn Noack. It was crunchy before it was cool to be crunchy, so I had like the most crunchy mom. And so when things were told to us, kind of, hey, this might be as good as it's going to get, she said, no, no, thank you. We do not accept that. And we went and looked for other alternative, functional, natural forms of medicine that gave me ultimate healing. And so neurofeedback, even years down the road, was a part of that healing for me on a very deep neurological level. So I was, 2 years into my master's program. My license is in clinical mental health, going, oh my gosh, I don't think I want to be a counselor. And when you're 2 years deep, it's like, oh crap. And so I was going, oh my gosh, I don't think that this is for me. Professor who said, hey, I know these women doing this neuro thing, and I know you're super brain based. I think I need to connect you. And, I met Rachel Lambert, my business partner, and, she very much spoke into me like, hey, this is what you're supposed to be doing. She's aggressive. And I was like, I don't know if it is. She was like, no, it is. And that, yes, it was. I started, the minute I graduated, I started working with them as a neurospecialist and have a very vivid memory of the first person sitting across from me struggling with a brain injury. And I was like, oh, there it is. That's that, life moment of, kind of finding meaning in our suffering and knowing, why we went through what we went through so that we can have impact now. So truly, I mean it, that neurofeedback, it was always in my future. And now it is very much deeply not only what I do, but a passion project to make sure that the world knows that their brains are neuroplastic, they're willing to change. You're not beholden to what you're dealing with now.
Which is exactly my experience. So thank you so much for saying it because sometimes it feels hard to keep saying the same thing. So it's so nice when someone else can say, hey, your brain is neuroplastic. Your brain can change. Absolutely. You can make so many changes and gains in the brain. You just need the appropriate stimulus at the right time. I think that's really what it comes down to. You need the appropriate stimulus at the right time and someone who understands how to help coach you through and help give you a protocol for how to do that.
That's exactly right. Going back to working out, right? That we could have tried 100 different ways to lose weight and to train our bodies. And it takes that one time of going, wait, this is what my body needs. Everybody is unique. Everybody is individual. Every brain is unique. Every brain is individual, right? So that's what the brain map is looking at your individual DNA biological makeup and going, hey, here's how we're going to change what's going on in your brain. Not everyone's brain, because everyone's brain isn't your brain.
And so let's talk about the brain as a whole. We all have these baseline characteristics. And one of those characteristics or ways that we characterize the brain is through brain waves. Will you talk us through each of the main brain waves and what its function is in the body?
So all humans are capable of producing the same brainwaves. And this is kind of the lens or the scope in which we look at the brain map is through brainwaves. So we all have delta, which are our deep, slow, restorative relaxation sleep waves. So if or when you are in the best part of sleep at night, the brain is producing these super slow moving delta waves. Theta is kind of a drifting into sleep wave where we're not fully asleep, but we're not fully awake, kind of a daydreamy type place. Wave activity is your receptor. Alpha is like your bridge. It helps push our brain up into the fast, it moves it into the slow. Too much or too little alpha, and we tend to feel really stuck. Like either I am so stuck in the fast, my brain is racing, I can't shut it off. Or I'm so stuck in the slow, I feel foggy, lethargic. Why can't I get my brain up and working? Beta is clean, focused, motivational energy flow state. That's like you're having the best day, you are cruising along, things are going your way. It's like that fresh cup of coffee energy in the morning. High beta is fight or flight. Anxiety, irritability, defense mechanisms, hypervigilance. It is the most physiologically uncomfortable place for us to be, and also one of the most common things that our society deals with. We should not be producing tons of high beta unless we're being chased by a bear right now. But if we're trying to go to sleep at night, if we're trying to work our job, if we're trying to parent our kids, and our brain is lit with high beta, it's gonna be very uncomfortable. We're gonna be very reactive, very anxious. It's gonna create a lot of unfavorable symptomology.
And I will say for me, like because I also had a car accident and had a traumatic brain injury. I would say for me, pre-brain injury, I don't think I spent a lot of time in high beta. I think that was a very rare place for me to be. I feel like I could tolerate stressors well. And then once I had this injury, I had so much high beta. And I think for me, I didn't understand that it was a brainwave, so I felt very much so that I was personally unable to tolerate stress, and I
Yep.
gave myself a lot of blame and shame over that, that I suddenly one day couldn't tolerate stress the way that I could anymore, and that this anxious feeling was something that, 1, I was gonna have to tolerate and have my whole life, and that 2, I was doing it, that there was something that I was physically doing that was causing this, and it was really understanding these brain waves that helped me to shift this perspective of, "Oh, I probably wasn't here before." My brain waves were doing a totally different pattern. I had a completely different brain I mean, I don't have a brain map of pre-injury, so I don't know, but I could pretty much so guarantee you the brain map that I first did with you guys probably looked nothing like my brain pre-injury.
Brain injuries are such a weird injury because they're invisible, right? It generally,
Mhm.
I mean, not always, but usually it's an invisible injury. So when your arm is broken and it's in a cast, it's like, oh my goodness, you must be in pain, right? Something must be wrong. It is healing. Versus when it's our brain and when it's more like somatic symptoms or, emotional symptoms like anxiety, like frustration. It's like, oh, you're just being grumpy, you're just whatever. And that's where it gets masked with that. Versus when we do the brain map, and especially when I know someone has had a traumatic brain injury, I had a neurosurgeon explain it to me one time that when you've had a brain injury, it's like your emotional switch gets flipped on and there's not an off switch. I remember being, I'm 19 years old in a walker. I would be in a crowd. When I say crowd, 20 people, not a big crowd. And I would freak out, just so overstimulated, crying, hyperventilating. And before that, I was Miss Susie, social, whatever. And it was such a large shift. Now that has changed over many years, but I had that information versus a lot of people have brain injuries that they don't even know are brain injuries, right? When I was growing up, it was called getting your bell rung, not anything about concussion or brain injury. And we have so much more information now. So thank you for sharing that. And you're exactly right that there's a lot of personal, I should just be different. I should just have control over this. Do you have control over waking up and walking in the morning? Like if you wanted to, could you forget? No, that's a deeply ingrained neurological pattern. So we need to take off that stigma, with when it comes to like mental health and brain health, that equally as deeply ingrained as walking and talking and eating are anxiety, depression, and trauma. And equally, just as it would take a lot to change those patterns, it will take a lot to change these, but it's possible.
I wanted to go back and talk about alpha. I think that my brainwaves pre-injury were good at shifting. One of the things that was so hard for me to understand was I didn't have a shifting mechanism. I either was all the way on or all the way off, and I could not figure out how to regulate myself. And so what that looked like in graduate school, because I also went to graduate school 8 months after a traumatic brain injury, unhealed. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. It was that I can study all day and all night, and even if I sleep, it doesn't help. Like, there's no amount of rest, there's no amount of sleep, nothing helps. My brain's just on all the time, and there's nothing I can do. Like, I can try to quote unquote relax. I could go to a meditation class. I could go to a yoga class. Nope. Like there is no amount of me trying to relax that did anything. Like there was no breath work. No, I threw the gamut at it and was like, maybe I will just never be relaxed again. Maybe I just am going to permanently be in fight or flight. That's it. Maybe that's where I'm at.
Right? Like, I guess this is where I will live forever. And you're right. And people live there. People sit there all day, every day, and are like, this is just kind of the cards that I'm dealt. So, alpha is very much that gear shifter, right? It is moving us around. It feels really good. If you've ever driven stick, if your gear shifter is sticky, that's going to be a very uncomfortable ride, right? That is bumpy. That does not work well. And you're also right that probably, first off, some people are like straight up born with no alpha. That actually, when I see, so I do map reviews, and when I see, somebody who has very little or no alpha in their brain, sometimes now different than a brain injury, a lot of times it's a pattern for like early developmental trauma. That alpha gives us safety and security. And if we never developed any alpha, probably we didn't grow up with a lot of safety and security, right? So that's a conversation that we have as well. But brain injuries are kind of their own, basket of crazy because what we had before is probably not what we have now. You're right that
Absolutely.
it's shaken everything up. And now it's like, I think I did used to have neurological flexibility. Now I don't. But again, just like anything, okay, how do we get that back? How do we flex that muscle? How do we train it? Because your brain, it cannot be on all the time. Even if you drive a Ferrari, a high powered, sick vehicle meant to drive, if you go 100 miles an hour 24/7, you're going to burn out, right? It's going to be, at some point, she's going to be done and you're going to be cooked.
If any of this resonates with you, please go get your brain map read because I think it just gives you such a good perspective of the things that are in your control and then the things that are just not in your control. And I think that's what neurofeedback has really done for me personally is help me separate like what I have control over because I do believe in free will and free control.
Yes.
And I also believe that if my brain is doing this pattern, I as much as I'm trying to fight my own brain, I'm not
I mean, I'm here for like, I will will myself into doing a lot of things, right?
100%.
If I, if someone can will themselves into getting out of high beta just cuz, like, let me know you have a stronger brain than myself, right? That it's just like learning any new skill, repetition, teaching enough times over time doing that. That is what neurofeedback is, right? It is repetition of new skills. So eventually, right, just as, how your brain was functioning before, once we teach it to create new patterns, now it has those new patterns as committed to permanency. So neurofeedback's not something we should have to do forever, right? It really should be kind of, a means to an ends at some point that now my brain has those skills and can do them on their own.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you maybe in a different way of how brainwaves impact emotion and cognition. So how are all of those things tied together?
So, brainwaves, if we have like a general understanding of right brain versus left brain, right? The right side of our brain is more feeling and emotion and attachment. The left side of our brain is more linear learning, mathematics, and logic. Think if we take a lot of slow wave activity, delta, theta, and we put it right in our linear learning center. That's not great, right? And that is like we need to go fast and we're just puttering along in slow. So when we talk about symptomology, right? Hey, and this can be from brain injuries, this can be from a lot of different things, brain fog, right? Hey, I just do not feel like super cognitively clear. I have a lot of brain fog. Or if we're talking about learning issues, right? Maybe not, like a diagnosed learning disability, but somebody's like, learning is a battle for me, right? I have a hard time retaining information. Guaranteed, I'm going to look at that brain map and go, oh, you have slow wave activity where you need to have fast wave activity happening. And that can come from, kind of it's which came first, the chicken or the egg. People are like, why? I don't know. I mean, maybe it's early trauma. Maybe it's a brain injury. Biology, a little bit of what your parents gave to you, that the brain map doesn't tell me, hey, this is exactly why this is happening. It just tells me that it is happening, right? And it needs to be
Absolutely.
addressed. Same thing with, that person who has no emotional control, right? That they just like fly off the handle. They say, right, I just go from freaking 0 to 100, something happens, I like lose my cookies. Teed, they have a lot of fast wave activity in their emotion center, right? Their emotions are hijacked. Their brain is hijacked. They say they're going from 0 to 100. They're probably going from 80 or 90 to 100, right? Because their brain has never seen zero. It does not operate in zero. But when 80 is your baseline, 80 feels like zero. So, depending on where brainwaves are happening within the brain, amygdala, prefrontal cortex, hypothalamus, occipital lobe, that's going to dictate a lot of ways, like how you're going to experience that and probably how it's going to show up within behavior, how it's going to show up for you emotionally, how it's going to show up for you when it pertains to sleep, somatically, how you experience things in your body. I could have 5 people come in with anxiety. I could tell you, hey, I bet you experience it more heady, right? Overthinking, ruminating. Hey, I bet you have more visceral, like very body panic attacks. Hey, I bet you have like tummy issues. That I bet digestion wise, you are messed up with anxiety. Yes, because of where it's happening in the brain. So, was that helpful? Does that kind of give a little bit of a word picture of, kind of where it's
It's so
happening with?
helpful. Yeah, and I wanted to also share because I just had my another brain map done, and I just met with Rachel to go over what was going on, and it's so interesting because I forget how kind of crazy accurate this is, that what
A
I'm
little scary
experiencing
accurate.
it's sort of scary accurate. So for me, I'm having more movement-based, I would say almost apraxia, where I have a hard time watching movement and then mimicking it, and I mentioned this as part of our, like, catch up, and Rachel says, I can absolutely see that. I can see where that is in your brain. That's exactly what you're experiencing, and it's this feeling of, "Oh, I can't think myself out of this." Because part of me goes, "Shauna, you know movement really well. You're a physical therapist. You teach people how to move, and yet you are having a hard time figuring out how to move, and I can't think myself I can't do enough repetition of it to think myself out of it." And so it's so helpful for me to have someone on the outside of me say, "Hey, I actually see that in your brain map, and there's no amount of cognition that you can try to fix this.
Truly. Yeah, you cannot
Please keep
behaviorally
trying."
get out of this.
Right, right. Please keep trying, but, like,
By all means.
unless we change how your brain is functioning in that area of your brain, you can keep trying and you probably won't get very far. And I think that's the really the pro con list, right? If you don't know about it, it's very frustrating because we all think that everything is neuroplastic, and I agree, but sometimes you need the right neuroplastic invent or thing to help you break through that next layer.
Exactly right. That we want health to be kind of a silver bullet, right? That, like, hey, I want to do this one thing and it's going to solve all the things. Wouldn't that be the best? Like, that sounds dope. Health is a series of puzzle pieces. And for a lot of people, that we focus very heavily neck down, which I believe in. I do a lot of functional medicine. Your brain, if your brain is not in gear, if your brain is kind of working against you in that way, we're going to be butting up against a wall time after time. So that's where neurofeedback is kind of, it's like the ultimate hack of like, okay, let's take I've done all the things. I'm butting up against a wall. What's left? Great. Let's go look at the brain. Because I mean, things originate in the brain. So if the brain is, misfiring, if the brain is not working for you, we need to know exactly where that is.
That brings me to my next question, which is when someone does a neurofeedback protocol, what does it do to the brainwave? So, what is it actually doing with your brainwaves? Because at least for me, and I'll let you give more details, but for me, when we look at my map, sometimes we're trying to upregulate and sometimes we're trying to downregulate. So there's lots of possibilities, I will say.
You're exactly right. And this is where it comes down to protocols that are tailored just for you, right? Because we might look at a brain map and, hey, high beta needs to come down. If high beta needs to come down and theta has nothing, theta needs to come up, right? As human beings, we only have a finite amount of electrical energy, not infinite. So if your brain is pumping out tons of high beta, it probably doesn't have anything left over for alpha, theta, delta, right? So when you're training, right? So, Shauna, when you're at home and you have your headset on, you have the app on your phone, essentially what we're doing is we are basically, as clinicians, we're putting in on the back end, okay, today your protocol, right? We're not going to train everything at once. Wouldn't that be so overwhelming if every single day at the gym was like full body crush? No, that's why we have upper body, lower body, abs, rest day. Like, we got to hit different areas. So today we're going to train just down high beta, just in the prefrontal cortex. We're going to train up theta, only in the parietal lobe. Okay, great. We plug that in on the back end. So then essentially what's happening in the system is we are giving the brain thresholds, right? Little goals and areas to reach. As you know, we're not saying, hey, I want your brain to be producing 30 hertz of microvoltage in theta. If it's producing 0 hertz, that's like a lofty goal, right? So I might say, hey, today, give me 5. Give me 5 hertz of microvoltage. And fortunately, as human beings, we have these phenomenal performance brains, right? Our brains want to figure out how to win things. When you think about video games, so I don't know how to play video games, but a lot of people do. And, when I ask kids, right, hey, what do you get when you win a video game? What do you mean? Well, does somebody run in the room and give you like a cookie or cash or something? No. Well, no, it's only lights and sounds and action. Social media. Surprisingly, nobody actually gets anything when somebody likes your post, right? It feels good. You don't actually get anything. It's a little dump of dopamine. So your brain is looking for that reward, right? If you're watching the show and the screen is dark, how frustrating. If the volume is low, well, I can't even hear what's going on. Your brain, every brain on the planet, is going to naturally start to fire off different wave activity in order to seek that, in order to make that happen. And it doesn't know what to do right away. It is a total learning experience. So if your brain's pumping out all high beta and I'm asking for theta, it might fire off a little alpha and some delta and some more high beta. Eventually, it's going to fire off some theta, even in super small hertz of microvoltage, kind of as a tester. Like, is this even what you're looking for? The minute that hits the system, the screen will get bigger, the volume will go up. Your brain is being given that little dump of dopamine telling it, "Ooh, yeah, that was it. Keep going. I want more of that." Okay, so now it's hit that threshold. So now we're going to up it a little bit. Okay, now you can hit this new threshold, right? My mom does remote neurofeedback, and like for probably the first 6 months, she was like, "I can never hit 100." Angie, I was like, "Mom, the goal is not to hit 100. That I know you want to win I know you want to win neurofeedback. That's not the goal. We're resetting the threshold." She's like, "I only got 40% today." I'm like, "That's still good, Mom." So it really is about kind of creating these new goals that then your brain can reach. So it's constantly learning.
And I will say when I first started neurofeedback, so what that looks like is what she's talking about is when you do the remote program, there'll be a YouTube video and I'll pick a video. And then as I'm watching it, like it'll get really quiet and then I can't hear anything. And then the screen will get really black and then it's really loud and then it's really quiet. And like when you first do it, you're like, brain, figure it out. Like I'm going bananas over here. Like, do this better because I wanna hear this video and I wanna see it, and it is hilariously motivating because you want your brain to figure this out because even though it's a silly YouTube video, you wanna know what's going on. Like, I'm such a curious
Human
person that
nature.
I don't
Yep.
wanna miss a second.
Yep.
And
Human
so
nature. We want that reward. Give it to
yeah,
me.
yeah. So that's what's really interesting about like you're saying, so, you know, I felt the same as your mom. I was like, "I need 100%, like, I am a 100% kid, like, where's my 100%?" And it's like 36%. I'm like, "Got it.
Yep.
Okay,
Where's
noted."
my A plus plus? Where is it?
Yeah. Um, what, uh, are some common symptoms or signs that neurofeedback could be beneficial for someone?
So first off, I am obviously I have committed my life to neurofeedback. Neurofeedback and Angie are one and the same. So I believe that everybody can benefit from having a stronger brain, having better brain health and mental wellness. But I would say, I mean, definitely there's people, right? If you're coming into neurofeedback and you're like, my life is so perfect. Like I've never felt more spectacular. I just want to be that 1% better. I love that client. That's the best. That's like 1% of the clients that I see. Everybody else, it's anxiety, depression, AD, trauma, brain injuries, brain fog, sleep issues. I mean, strokes. I mean, we see the gamut of people. And honestly, a lot of times I see people on the back end. I'd love to see people on the front end. I would love to see neurofeedback over the next 20 years be a front line of defense. Often I see people who have gone through 50 different meds, are so frustrated. I hear words like, if this doesn't work, I don't know what I'll do. I tend to see people who are dark, feeling pretty darks. Those are some symptoms, but really, if it feels neurologically related. However, I've also seen a lot of people for GI issues, right? That I will have people come in who are like, I have the worst tummy issues, but I've tried all the other things, right? That I have had the scans. There's quote unquote, there's nothing wrong with my gut. There's nothing wrong. So the gut brain connection is super, interconnected as we know. So even something that maybe feels like, oh, that's not neurological, chronic pain, that's not neurological. Actually, there's a very good chance that it is.
That's fascinating. I was also wondering if you see a lot of women postpartum because I think that's such a great time to bring people into their brain health because I think all of these things were probably there prior to. You just didn't know they were there, and then you get a
Now they're
big
exacerbated.
and now they're exacerbated because 'cause you're not sleeping and your hormones just went completely in another direction.
So I see women pre-baby, right? And I also see a lot of women who are having fertility issues, right? That
Mm.
brain also regulates a lot. We actually call them brain code babies. That I have women come in who are like, I cannot get pregnant. And you know how much pressure there is you're putting on your body to like do this and this 3 days a month. And so I see these super overstimulated brains. And let's chill your central nervous system out a little bit and then see if your body is actually ready to carry this baby. I see a lot of women during pregnancy because a lot of this stuff shows up. You're pregnant for 6 weeks, and then you're like, wait, why do I feel all these things? And neurofeedback is 100% safe to do. But you are right that I would say a majority of people I see postpartum, right? That you're tired and you're grumpy and you're feeling all the things that you're right. And I had a little bit of anxiety before, but it was totally manageable. Now it's not. You know, I was a little bit OCD before. Now I can't leave my so I do see those things and, but I don't want to take a bunch of meds or meds don't feel congruent for me and my family. Neurofeedback is a fantastic alternative option.
I also wanted to ask about aging, an aging brain, right? Like we're all aging, and is there a time in lifespan where you wish you could catch people so that cognitive decline can be prevented? Is there a good time to come and get a neurofeedback scan and see what your brain is doing, and how does that change over time in your lifetime?
I love that you asked that question because longevity is it's such like a trigger word right now, right? Longevity, how do I have this? So first off, I train people into their 80s. Some of my favorite clients are like, I just want to keep my brain fresh. Heck yeah, keep that brain fresh. I would say when you start to feel anything that feels abnormal, right? That, I have 40-year-olds being like, well, yeah, I'm having some pretty serious memory issues, but that's just aging. What are you talking about? In what world are we having memory issues at 40? Like, dear, or I'm 55 and yeah, I can't, but no, your brain is an amazing muscle for you, right? When you see that like shredded 77-year-old walking around where you're like, you're so ripped, what are you doing? What are they doing? They're eating right. They're going to the gym. They're like they're not doing anything, like wildly out of the norm. They're taking care of the neck down. Taking care of the neck up is critical in any stage of life, right? I would think of neurofeedback like, yes, some people come in for more of an acute issue, right? Hey, I'm having some pretty serious anxiety. I want to come in. Great. Let's tackle that. Once that feels under control and your brain is like, hey, I have a well oiled machine, I would say come in twice a year. Come in, 3 times a year. Do a little booster session. Why? Because we're here for long-term brain health, right? But if you're so my I use my family a lot, and I do not have their permission to tell all those stories, but that feels fine because they're my family, so it is what it is. But I remember my sister called me, and she was like, "I think mom might have, like, early onset Alzheimer's or dementia or something. She is just, like, forgetting so much." And I was like, "No way, man." And so, obviously, I went and I'd done brain maps on her before, which is why I knew that she didn't, but I went and did a brain map, and just with some life stressors that had happened, her brain was so overstimulated. She was so stressed out that it was looking like cognitive decline, and it was cognitive decline, but not from something degenerative. And so she did a series of neurofeedback. And that's why my sister and my brother in law ended up doing neurofeedback because my brother-in-law was like, "Your mom's like a different person. What used to take her weeks to accomplish, she can accomplish in a weekend because she's not so overwhelmed and so overstimulated." So I also see people come in who are like, "I know I have something degenerative going on." Maybe, possibly, maybe not.
Yeah, I wonder because I think all of these things sound so similar at a certain point, like all the symptoms sound similar. I wonder what the actual percentage is of people who have neurodegenerative versus overwhelmed brains because life is overwhelming. And if you were able to sit with the overwhelm and process it in a different way, such as neurofeedback, I wonder how different people would have of an experience of their brain as they age.
You are 100% right. That's anything. ADHD, the amount of people that I see who have been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, compared to the actual neurological pattern that I see that is congruent with that diagnosis. I know people can't see me looking at you, but I'm literally looking at you going like, are you freaking kidding me? It is the most misdiagnosed thing that I see day in and day out. So absolutely that the field of, psychiatry, psychology is the only field of medicine that we don't measure the organ that we're going to treat. What? Makes absolutely no sense. Neurofeedback, we do, right? So let's get a scan. Let's see what's going on. And God forbid it is something, neurodegenerative. Let's catch it on the front end. Let's do everything we can to keep your brain as strong as we can for as long as we can. But let's say it's not. then great. Let's correct some of those patterns that are weighing you down and ultimately causing issues.
Right, because I would imagine that even if you do have something neurodegenerative, there are things that you can probably help because you're helping the body release old patterning. I think so much of our sickness, illness, disease is just us holding on to old patterning and not knowing how to shift through it.
Yep. And we as a culture now, I mean, think about we spend half of our days, by half, I mean three-fourths of our days on screens. We're so overstimulated. Even in the last couple of weeks, I do not believe that our brains are meant to hear such horrible and saddening news all the time. Every time we open our phone, we see horrible, sad, violent images. And like we as human beings are not meant to take all of that in all the time. And the idea that that does not affect us is incorrect. It absolutely does, and it seeps into our psyche. So you're right that even if we feel like, oh, I'm just not really sensitive to stuff like that. No, I bet you are, but you're becoming desensitized to it. But the idea that it's not overstimulating your brain, it is.
Right. And so what are the things that you're doing to help your brain
Yes,
to be able to process everything that's going on around you?
absolutely. Strengthen that muscle, right? If we're going to use it all the time, which we are, how do we keep it strong?
Yeah. The next thing I wanted to ask you is how is neurofeedback different from someone who has, like us, who had a brain injury versus someone who has anxiety, depression? How are those two things similar and different?
Yeah. So the actual neurofeedback, like operant conditioning, what we're going to do is the same, right? What we're going to put in on the back end, your protocols, your brain map is going to be 100% individualized and tailored. Even five people who come in with anxiety, it's going to be completely individualized and tailored. Five people with brain injuries, completely different, right? So every single brain, I've never, ever, I have seen thousands. I can't even imagine how many, like, thousands and thousands of brain maps I've looked at now, too, that look exactly the same. It's your fingerprint. They cannot look exactly the same. There are always caveats. There's always like, "Oh, man, yeah, you're all high beta, but look at this one thing over here." Even though, like, two people who have totally different brains and symptomology, they are both doing neurofeedback. They're both training their brain. So what we are putting in on the back end is totally individualized to them, but they might wanna watch the same YouTube video that you're watching. Cool, that's no problem. They can do that. What their brain is having to work on, totally unique.
And do you see a patterning between anxiety, depression versus an injury? Do you see a difference in where the starting points are? Or do sometimes brains, no matter what you're coming in for, look similar? Like, do a lot of people have high beta? Because I know that's such a classic, now I know such a classic sign of a brain injury. I'm wondering, is that similar for people with anxiety, depression? Do they also have that and that came through other stressors that they've had through their lifespan?
So there's high beta is one thing. Brain injuries are interesting in that they tend to have dual patterns. Okay. So often I do see high beta in a brain injury pattern, but I also see overactive delta. So normally,
Mm.
if someone has just high beta, I won't necessarily be like a brain injury. But when I see this pattern of overactive delta along with that, I always ask. Because sometimes if it's a 30-year-old brain injury, sometimes people don't put it in their paperwork because they don't think it's applicable, right? And I'll just ask, like, hey, do you have any type of concussion history? Oh, yeah, I played football in high school, but, no biggie. I'm like, okay, no brain injury, and okay, noted. And that's that pattern of like kind of fogginess and mental fatigue and getting overstimulated. Like it just looks a little different than like just a high beta brain. So there's all these little caveats. That's why, I mean, I'm such a freaking brain nerd. I don't even care, like own it. It's so amazing to look at brains and see these little patterns, right? Of like, ooh, this one thing over here kind of means this. And honestly, it's also about us asking questions, right? That, you know your brain best. I probably am not going to tell you anything in a brain map review that you don't already know about your brain. I'm just going to tell you kind of why it's happening and where it's coming from. But I ask questions that, most people who have high beta right on the cingulate have some OCD symptomology. Occasionally, I'll have somebody who's like, nope, never struggled with it in my life. Okay. 90% of the time people show that, but your brain is unique and individual in that it doesn't manifest in that symptomology. Also, I have people who don't associate with certain kind of terms, if you will. So I will definitely also ask, do you associate with the diagnostic term anxiety? And I have people, you could have all high beta. Their brain is swimming. They swim in high beta. I'm like, do you associate with anxiety? They're like, absolutely not. Never experienced it in my life. I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, do you have any type of ruminating, catastrophizing? Do you overthink? Well, yes. I'm like, taking notes, like no anxiety. So, sometimes we're saying the same thing, but we're just saying it a little bit differently. That's okay.
that brings me to something because on my brain map that I just did with Rachel, she said, "Do you have a history of having depression?" And I said, I don't think so. I don't think I mean, I've obviously I'm a human, so I've had low points in my life, but I think that is very familial for me. I think that my family has a history of that, and something that I've learned from brain injury is that a lot of times your patterns that are familial, that could have arisen in your lifetime, they a lot of times pop up to the surface, and maybe they would have in your lifetime and maybe they wouldn't have, but the brain injury is that big catalyst, and so for me, that's a big opportunity to look at that and to look at depression because for me, I definitely don't have that feeling. Like, even if you list off symptoms, I'd be like, I don't think so. And the conversation that Rachel and I had was, you have gotten really good at compensating. Like, I think you're spending a lot of your brain energy trying to not be depressed. You're spending a lot of your bandwidth on trying not to be the thing that you don't want to be. And I think I'm sure everyone has that too, of even though I have the propensity for that, I'm overly trying to not do that. And so I'm really looking forward to this next protocol. I feel like I'm a positive
Yeah.
glass half full person. How do I get to do that with less efforting?
Yeah. Does your brain constantly have to fight it, or can we make it easier where it's not in that battle day in and day out? Yes, and I think it sounds like Rachel explained that just exquisitely.
Yeah, which I don't think I'm battling, but our brains are so like complicated that it's like, what is this mental game that I'm playing that I don't even realize I'm playing? And that's also something that's been so interesting with neurofeedback is what are the mental games that I'm playing that I don't even realize that I'm participating in? And how do I take away some of those patterns so that my brain has less to do? How do I give myself less to do instead of more to do?
Yes, and how do you work smarter, not harder, right? That your brain is capable of so much, but how do we make it easier for your brain to accomplish all the things it needs to accomplish for you?
The next thing I wanted to ask you was what's the difference between doing neurofeedback? Because I know you guys have offices and I don't live close to them. So
Yeah.
what's the difference in the protocol or length? What do you see the difference between doing office versus remote?
Yes, so we do you're right. We have offices here in Colorado, Highlands Ranch, one in Westminster, one on Colorado Boulevard. We also have an office in Tulsa. We also have an office in Dallas. But yeah, if you're not close to any of those, we literally have people across the world. We just had a meeting today. I have a new client in Switzerland. So we quite literally have clients
Amazing.
absolutely everywhere. The biggest difference that I would say is kind of like a time difference, right? That coming in office, I would say most people in office do between 40 to 60 sessions, but we're doing 2 times a week at the beginning, and those are 50-minute sessions. With remote, you might be doing 3 or 4 times a week, but those are 20-minute sessions. So if you are not close to an office and you're like, hey, I'm gonna have to drive 45 minutes to the office, then I'm there for 50 minutes, then I drive 45 minutes back, that might seem like, man, that feels like a lot of time spent versus, I could pop in, a quick 20-minute session on my lunch break at home or right before I go to bed or right when I wake up in the morning. But then I also have people, I kind of say it like my mom is an incredible remote neurofeedback candidate because she was diligent. She did that like every single day. And then my brother in law had a headset for 3 months. And I was like, have you done one session? I know you haven't. I could see it on the back end. He's like, no, he would be the person who needs an in person appointment, right? That I'm going to charge him if he doesn't show up, So know yourself. If you're like, hey, I'm really an in clinic person, go in clinic. If remote is a better option, you're kind of self motivated at home, fire it up. There is not an efficacy difference. And I want to make sure that everyone hears that super clearly. There is not an efficacy difference between in person and remote. So you are not sacrificing results. You're not sacrificing experience. With remote, you're still going to meet with your remote clinician once a week to talk through here's what we're seeing on our end. How are you feeling? All those things. So this is not like DIY at home. It just gives you a lot more flexibility. Old school. I love going in office for sessions. Do I have a headset at home? Absolutely, I do. But I just love, going in person. That's just me. I would say that a lot of people, the way in which our world has gone, especially after COVID, we want to do anything that we want to do from wherever we want to do it from. So remote is a really fantastic option for that.
I talk up remote
Yeah.
because I think most people, they're like, how do I fit one more thing in my schedule? And
Yes.
I promise you, you have 20 minutes to watch a silly video because you're probably going to go and watch a silly video anyway. So you might as well train your brain while you're watching a silly
How
video.
much
So,
doom scrolling did you do last night? Like, let's be serious.
how much,
How
right,
much?
right. Like, or you watched a TV show, so just watch a YouTube, like, you don't need to leave your own home. You got 20 minutes. I guarantee you, you can do that multiple days a week. It's how I feel about working out too. Like, get a set of dumbbells at home because are you going to go to the gym every day? No, and that's okay. But what are you going to actually do? What's the thing? We're saying the same thing. What's the thing that you're actually going to do? How do I give you a tool that you're going to actually use?
Yeah. And I definitely have that, when people are like, gosh, I just don't think I have, the time. I always, my niece, whenever she's like, I don't, I can't afford that. I'm like, actually, you probably can. It's just that you don't value it right now. And that's okay.
Absolutely.
Right. Same thing with our time. Oh, I just don't have time to do that. It's just because you don't value it enough to do it right now. That's not a judgment. It's just the truth, right? That we will make time, we will put finances towards what we value. And unfortunately, sometimes when it comes to our brain and our health in general, we wait until we have problems to make it a value. I tend to be on the front end. How do we foster that? How do we love what we have so that, you're going to pay for it now or later? You pay for it now in preemptive or you pay for it later and sick. It's one or the other.
Yeah, and it's generally more costly to do on the end,
It
on the
sure
back
is
end.
in a lot of different ways.
In a lot of ways. Energetically, emotionally, financially, yeah. How long we you sort of mentioned this before, that this isn't a forever thing, like, how long are you seeing most people do neurofeedback? What's an average length that people are doing this? I know people can come in to check in, but what when people are, like, actively working on neurofeedback, what's the timeline that a lot of people
I'd
are on?
probably say 6 to 9 months. Usually that's like a pretty, even in person or remote, usually 6 to 9 is kind of the sweet spot. Some people do a little bit more. I met with my remote team today, and one of my clinicians was like, there is a lady who's been doing remote neurofeedback for 2 years. Now, does she do it every day for 2 years? No. She's probably doing at this point 2 sessions a month. But she's older. She loves it. She loves how it makes her feel. Great. For the average person, I would say 6 to 9.
And let's talk about what it looks like to work with you guys. How do people work with you? What does that look like? What's the process?
Absolutely. So we do 100% free consultation. So I never want it to cost someone something financially to learn what their options are and to educate themselves more on neurofeedback. Also, Rachel, my business partner, and I do 100% of the consultations for Brain Code Centers. Not because we have all of the time to do that, but because it's something that we hold so dear is educating and kind of offering hope in that way. So if you want to learn more about it, you either can pop on our Instagram or our website and fill out like a request consultation now. Like I said, it'll be 100% free. It's 30 minutes. We get on a Zoom or a phone call and just talk about you, right? What is neurofeedback? How can it benefit you? Tell me about your individual symptomology. Let's talk pricing. Let's talk timing, all those things. Does it feel right? If it does, let's schedule the brain map. If you're remote, let's get you equipment shipped out. After that, right, brain map review, either way, in person or remote, brain map review. I would say generally we probably have about a 2 week turnaround time of someone doing a consultation and starting sessions if they're Johnny on the spot and we get it going. Because I definitely get questions like, are you on like a 6 month waiting list? Nope. That if you are looking for help and you're like, I kind of need it now, we're talking probably, I mean, I've gotten people in the next day for a brain map. So I definitely,
Amazing.
when you're coming in and like, I need help right now, can I always do that? No. Can I try to make that happen? Yes.
And what does it look like when people work with you? So let's say someone decides to work with you. What is the commitment? What are people doing?
Yeah. So with remote is like it's a 6 month program. And the reason for that being is, I've had people like, well, can I try it for, a month? You can absolutely go to the gym one time. And if you're not shredded, you can be like, the gym sucks. But the gym doesn't suck. It's that you went one time and that's just actually not how muscles are made? So that is, yeah, like, somebody could do one session of neurofeedback. That's why we make it a 6 month program because I'm like, listen, I want you to have lasting life transformation results, not I did a couple of sessions and it didn't change my life. We live in the Amazon Prime era where if it's not on my doorstep the next day, that it's like it's not fast enough. Give it a second, right? That the brain is not quite there yet. It probably took you a minute to get here. It's going to take you a minute to get out. In person, I would say that yeah, generally people do between like 40 and 60 sessions. Again, though, that's still between like, probably a 6 to 9 month time frame. So sometimes, at the end of a remote program, if someone gets to 6 months and we're like, hey, we really have these additional protocols that we need to work on, let's add on a month, we can do that. Everything, again, is individualized and tailored, but that gives a nice general time frame. It's usually either in person or remote's going to be around that 6 to 9 month mark of us doing really intensive training.
And then I'm gonna butcher the name of it, but this is the protocol that I'm doing is I signed up to do another year of what do you guys call that?
Yeah, of
Maintenance.
maintenance.
Yes, there we go, a maintenance
Yeah.
program, and so I went and did an in-person brain map because I happened to be in Denver this summer and went, "Okay, I know that my brain actually has changed significantly," because I took a big gap off from neurofeedback and did other things and went, "I think there's still more things that I can work on, but I need to see what those things are because those are different." I've now resolved and I've trained my brain in the ways that it was, and so now what are these other things that are still there for me?
Absolutely. I think, often it's like, hey, there's some really big like brain injury, right? There's some really big hurdles that we need to get over. Now that we've like resolved a lot of those things, what else, like, how else can your brain thrive? So now it's like, sometimes if somebody gets in a car accident and it's like they have some really big, like a leg injury or, something where they need surgery, that's what we focus on. And then 6 months later, we're going, wait, actually, I think you had a concussion and we need to deal with that. So it kind of is going, okay, we dealt with the crisis. Now, how else can my brain thrive?
Which is the layer that I'm on, which is great. It's so great to be on a thriving layer of how do I help my brain in these 3 very specific ways? What does that look like? Let's go.
That's so exciting to get to a place where it's like, wait, now I can fine tune. Now we can get into some of the fun protocols that are more like almost peak performance, right? That how do I get my prefrontal cortex even more engaged? How do I resolve my sleep to be even more dialed? I think that's so incredible. Sometimes, people are like, hey, I came and did what I needed to do. I'm all set. I love the achiever. No, who's like, I want a little bit more. How can I be even better? I love that.
And I will say that I had a lot of cognitive symptoms post-injury, and I felt like pre-brain injury, I was at my peak mental performance. I felt so good mentally, and then I had this huge journey, and I would say I'm back to feeling, like, even better than I did prior to, which is amazing. I feel like cognitively, I am in such a phenomenal place, and I really give neurofeedback a lot of that credit because I again, couldn't will myself into better performance. There was no amount of willpower that I had because I have a lot of will. And like, I
Yes.
am like, "Let's go." I have a lot of that, and there was this level of will that I couldn't push past, and so if any of that resonates, I hope that what people take away is that you can try and do things as much as you can, and please keep trying, and if you're not looking at your brain, you're probably missing a piece of the puzzle.
I love that. Your story that just absolutely touched my heart. I think that's so amazing and so relatable, right? That like, hey, I was thriving, then I wasn't, and you did everything. I mean, first off, yes, neurofeedback, you did the work, right? Like we gave you the light vest, you grabbed onto it and helped yourself, So that's your brain did the work and you're thriving because of it. And that's absolutely amazing.
Well, thank you so much for joining. Is there any last thing you'd like to add before we close up?
Honestly, I would just say to any listener who feels like this might feel, a little like out of their realm, right? That I get, kind of the words like this might be a little too woo-hoo for me. That let's talk about it, right? Let's do a consultation. Let's talk about it. It's heavily science-based. And honestly, our goal is to offer people hope that if your brain is not thriving in the way that you want it, you can absolutely try all the things. We're more about getting to the root issue. And that, that's kind of the foundation of Brain Code Centers is truly offering life transformation hope.
Well, thank you guys so much for existing because I was, as a person who was also a clinician and didn't know that I could train my brain, was feeling very stuck in my brain is this is it. This is now my brain. And so thank you so much. I will link where people can find you for the consultation and I'll link your Instagram so that people can find and see some of your videos. So if you're a I need to see a video person, they have tons of videos on their Instagram. You've been listening to Authentically Shauna with Dr. Shauna Burke. The information contained in this podcast is provided for information purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products or techniques referenced in this podcast, consult your healthcare provider. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.